The elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, and Rebecca stepped out into the hospital corridor. She checked her watch for the third time in 2 minutes. 12:30. She had exactly 40 minutes before her next investor meeting, and this lunch appointment with Dr. Patterson couldn't wait any longer. Her company's annual health initiative program needed his approval, and she'd been trying to pin him down for weeks. The pediatric ward wasn't where she wanted to be on a Tuesday afternoon. Hospitals made her uncomfortable. The antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, the weight of worry that seemed to hang in the air. She walked quickly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her eyes fixed on the nurse's station at the end of the hallway where Dr. Patterson said he'd meet her. She was scrolling through emails on her phone, mentally rehearsing her pitch when something small and solid crashed into her legs. Rebecca stumbled, her phone slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. A little girl stood before her, no taller than her waist, wearing pink pajamas covered in cartoon butterflies. A bright yellow scarf was wrapped around her head, tied in a neat bow at the side. In her arms, she clutched a brown teddy bear that had clearly seen better days. One of its button eyes hung by a thread. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said, automatically bending to retrieve her phone. The screen had a new crack running across it. Perfect. Just what she needed today. But the little girl didn't move. She just stood there, staring up at Rebecca with the biggest brown eyes she'd ever seen. There was something in that gaze that made Rebecca pause. Something that made her forget about her cracked phone and her ticking clock. The girl's small voice came out barely above a whisper. "Are you somebody's mama?" Rebecca blinked. The question caught her completely off guard. No, sweetie. I'm not." The little girl's face fell for just a moment, then brightened again. "But you look like a mama. You're pretty like the mamas who come here." Rebecca felt something twist in her chest. She glanced around, looking for a parent or nurse. The hallway was empty except for them. "Where's your mom, honey? Are you lost?" The girl shook her head slowly. "I don't have a mama. She went to heaven before I was big enough to remember her." She said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when they've had to explain something painful so many times it loses its sharp edges. "Oh." Rebecca didn't know what else to say. She'd built a tech company from scratch, pitched to rooms full of skeptical investors, negotiated million-dollar deals. But standing here in this hospital hallway, she was completely unprepared for the honesty in this child's eyes. "I'm Sophie," the little girl said, hugging her teddy bear tighter. "This is Mr. Buttons. He doesn't have a mama either, so we take care of each other." "That's a good name for a bear," Rebecca managed. "I'm Rebecca." Sophie's face lit up with a smile that transformed her whole expression. "That's a beautiful name. Like a princess name." Before Rebecca could respond, a nurse in blue scrubs rounded the corner, relief washing over her face when she spotted Sophie. "There you are." "Sophie, you can't wander off like that. You know the rules." "I'm sorry, Miss Carroll," Sophie said, but she didn't sound very sorry. "I was looking for the lady with the nice shoes and I found her." The nurse, whose name tag read Carol Rodriguez, gave Rebecca an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry if she bothered you." "Sophie has a bit of an adventurous spirit." "She wasn't bothering me," Rebecca said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Carol gently took Sophie's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. It's time for your rest." But Sophie pulled back slightly, her eyes still locked on Rebecca. "Miss Carroll, can I ask her something?" "Please." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "One question, then we really need to go." Sophie turned back to Rebecca, and in that moment, the little girl's expression changed. The playfulness faded, replaced by something raw and hopeful and heartbreaking. She took a small step forward. "I don't have a mama," Sophie said again, her voice trembling now. "And I see all the other kids here with their mamas. And they read them stories and brush their hair and hold their hands when the medicine hurts." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back determinedly. "Please, can I spend just one day with you? Just one day, so I can know what it feels like to have a mama." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She felt her carefully constructed walls, the ones she'd spent years building to keep emotions at bay so she could focus on work and success and all the things that were supposed to matter, crack right down the middle. Carol's eyes glistened with tears too. "Sophie, honey, Ms. Rebecca is probably very busy. We can't just ask people." "It's okay," Rebecca heard herself say. She crouched down so she was at eye level with Sophie. "Why me, sweetie? You don't even know me." Sophie reached out and touched Rebecca's hand with her small fingers. Because when you looked at me, your eyes got soft. Most people look at my scarf and then look away fast because they feel sad. But you looked at me like I was just a regular girl. And I thought, maybe you could be my mama for just one day. Rebecca's throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried, but she was dangerously close now. She didn't know what to say. She had meetings, deadlines, responsibilities. Her life was structured down to the minute. There was no room for spontaneous days with children she didn't know. But Sophie's hand was still on hers, warm and trusting, and those eyes were looking at her with so much hope. "Tell me something, Sophie," Rebecca said softly. "Why are you in the hospital?" "I have something wrong with my blood," Sophie explained. "The doctors are fixing it, but it takes a long time. I've been here for 93 days. I count them on my calendar. 93 days. More than 3 months." Rebecca tried to imagine being 7 years old and spending 3 months in a hospital without parents. She stood up slowly, her mind racing. This was crazy. She couldn't just commit to spending a day with a sick child she'd just met. She had a company to run. People depending on her. Dr. Patterson was probably waiting for her right now. But then she looked at Carol, who was watching her with a mixture of hope and resignation, as if she'd seen too many people walk away from Sophie's request. "I have to check my schedule," Rebecca said finally. "But can I come back tomorrow to talk about this properly?" Sophie's face exploded with joy.
"Really? You mean it?"
"I mean it," Rebecca said, and felt something shift inside her as she made the promise. "I'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk about our day together." "Okay?" Sophie threw her arms around Rebecca's legs in a fierce hug. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mr. Buttons is so happy." As Carol led Sophie back down the hallway, the little girl kept turning around to wave, her smile bright enough to light up the entire floor. Rebecca stood there long after they disappeared around the corner, her hand pressed against her chest where that tight feeling wouldn't go away. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, Dr. Patterson, waiting in the cafeteria. "Everything okay?" Rebecca stared at the message. Then she looked down the hallway where Sophie had gone. For the first time in her adult life, Rebecca Chen wasn't sure if everything was okay. But strangely, she wasn't sure if that was a bad thing anymore. Rebecca sat in her office late that evening, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. The quarterly reports blurred together. She'd read the same paragraph 4 times and still couldn't tell you what it said. All she could see were those brown eyes, that yellow scarf, that hopeful smile. She reached for her phone and pulled up her calendar. Saturday was 2 days away. She had a conference call with the Tokyo office at 8 in the morning, a review meeting with the development team at 11, lunch with a potential client at 1, then the gym at 4 because she never missed her Saturday workout. Her finger hovered over the delete button. This was insane. She didn't know anything about kids. She'd built her entire adult life around her career, around being the person everyone could count on to show up, to deliver, to never let personal things get in the way of business. But she kept hearing Sophie's voice. "Just one day so I can know what it feels like to have a mama." Rebecca deleted the conference call, then the meeting, then the lunch. She stared at her now empty Saturday and felt something she hadn't felt in years. It might have been fear, or maybe it was excitement. She honestly couldn't tell the difference anymore. Friday afternoon, Rebecca walked into the hospital carrying a bag she'd spent way too long packing. She'd gone to 3 different stores, completely lost about what a 7-year-old girl might need for a day out. She'd ended up buying a pink backpack, some snacks, a hairbrush with butterflies on it, and a stuffed bunny that she immediately felt silly about. Sophie already had Mr. Buttons. Why would she need another stuffed animal? Carol met her at the nurse's station, surprise evident on her face. "You actually came back." "I said I would," Rebecca replied. "People say a lot of things to sick kids," Carol said quietly, "especially when they feel guilty or uncomfortable. But following through, that's rare." She led Rebecca down a different hallway, one painted with murals of clouds and rainbows. "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you. Fair warning, she's told every patient, nurse, and doctor on this floor that her new mama is coming to take her out tomorrow." Rebecca's stomach flipped. We're just spending a day together." Carol gave her a knowing look. "Tell that to Sophie." They stopped outside a door decorated with hand-drawn pictures of flowers and stars. Carol knocked gently before opening it. The room was small but bright, with afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. Sophie sat on her bed, wearing the same yellow scarf but now paired with a purple t-shirt with a unicorn on it. The moment she saw Rebecca, she jumped up so fast that Carol had to steady her. "You came. You really came. Mr. Buttons, I told you she would come." Rebecca found herself kneeling down as Sophie rushed over, and before she knew it, small arms were wrapped around her neck. The hug was tight and desperate, like Sophie was afraid Rebecca might disappear if she let go. "Of course I came," Rebecca said softly, and felt her eyes getting wet. She blinked hard. "I promised, didn't I?" Sophie pulled back, her face glowing. "Are we really going to spend tomorrow together?" "A whole day?" "A whole day," Rebecca confirmed. "From morning until bedtime. If that's okay with your doctors." "Dr. Mitchell already said yes." Sophie bounced on her toes. "As long as I take my medicine and don't get too tired." "And Miss Carol wrote down all the rules for you?" Carol handed Rebecca a folder. "Everything you need to know. Her medication schedule, dietary restrictions, emergency contacts, symptoms to watch for. My number's in there too. Call anytime, even if you just need reassurance." Rebecca took the folder, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This wasn't like a business deal. This was a child. A sick child who was trusting her with something precious. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" Rebecca asked Sophie, pushing her worries aside. Sophie's eyes went wide with possibility. "Really? I get to choose?" "It's your day. You tell me what would make it perfect." Sophie bit her lip, thinking hard. Then she climbed back onto her bed and reached under her pillow, pulling out a crumpled piece of notebook paper covered in crayon drawings and words in uneven handwriting. "I made a list," Sophie said shyly, "of things I want to do with a mama someday." "But we don't have to do all of them." "Even just one or two would be amazing." Rebecca took the paper carefully. The list read, "Have breakfast with pancakes. Shaped like hearts who? Go to a park and feed the ducks 3. Get my hair braided like a princess. Read stories together. On a cozy chair 5. Have hot chocolate with lots of marshmallow 6. Paint our nails matching colors and take a photo to remember forever." Rebecca's vision blurred as she read. These weren't extravagant wishes. No trips to theme parks or expensive toys. Just simple everyday moments that most kids took for granted. Moments Sophie had been dreaming about alone in this hospital room. "We're doing all of them," Rebecca heard herself say. "All of them?" Sophie's voice came out as a squeak. "Every single one." Rebecca looked up at Carol. "What time can I pick her up?" That night Rebecca couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her downtown apartment. The place suddenly felt sterile and cold. There were no pictures on the walls, no warmth, no signs that anyone actually lived here. It was more like an expensive hotel room than a home. She got up and started cleaning, really cleaning, for the first time in months. She pushed furniture around, trying to make the living room feel cozier. She found an old blanket in the closet and draped it over the couch. She even stopped by an all-night grocery store at 2 in the morning to buy ingredients for heart-shaped pancakes, standing in the baking aisle with her phone out, watching tutorial videos on how to make pancake batter from scratch. By the time the sun rose Saturday morning, Rebecca had reorganized her entire apartment, learned basic pancake making skills, charged her camera, and was running on pure adrenaline and 3 cups of coffee. She arrived at the hospital at 9, wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of her usual business attire. It felt strange, vulnerable somehow. Sophie was already dressed and waiting, practically vibrating with excitement. She wore a pink dress with white flowers and white sneakers that lit up when she walked. The yellow scarf was still there, tied with care. "You look so pretty," Sophie said, grabbing Rebecca's hand. "So do you," Rebecca replied, and meant it. The signing out process took 20 minutes. Carol went through every instruction twice, made sure Rebecca had her phone, the emergency numbers, the medication. She placed a small cooler bag with Sophie's medicine in Rebecca's car, along with a booster seat that hospital volunteers apparently kept on hand. As Rebecca buckled Sophie into the seat, the little girl looked up at her with such trust it made Rebecca's chest ache. "Are you ready?" Rebecca asked. Sophie nodded, hugging Mr. Buttons close. "I've been ready my whole life." Rebecca started the car, and as they pulled away from the hospital, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Sophie was watching the building disappear behind them, and on her face was the biggest smile Rebecca had ever seen. "Where to first?" Rebecca asked. "Home," Sophie said simply. "I want to see your home. I want to have breakfast with you like a real family." Rebecca's hands tightened on the steering wheel. A real family. When had she last felt like she was part of a real family? When had she last let anyone close enough to even try? Home it is, she said, her voice catching just a little. In the back seat, Sophie started humming a tune Rebecca didn't recognize. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rebecca felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. It felt like hope. Or maybe it was joy. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something she'd spent years convincing herself she didn't need. Love. Sophie's eyes went wide when they walked into Rebecca's apartment. She stood in the doorway, taking it all in with the kind of wonder most adults had forgotten how to feel. You live here? All by yourself? Sophie whispered, as if speaking too loud might break the spell. I do, Rebecca said, suddenly seeing the space through Sophie's eyes, the floor-to-ceiling windows with the city view, the modern furniture, the kitchen with counters that actually sparkled. Is it okay? It's like a castle, Sophie breathed. She took a few careful steps inside, her light-up shoes blinking with each movement. Can I really touch things? The question broke Rebecca's heart a little. Sweetie, you can touch anything you want. This is your home today, too. Sophie's face transformed. She walked over to the couch and ran her small hand along the fabric. Then she looked at the blank walls, tilting her head. How come you don't have any pictures? Rebecca paused. She'd never really thought about it. I guess I've been too busy to put any up. That's sad, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Pictures make a place feel happy, like you have people who love you watching over you all the time. You're pretty smart, you know that? Sophie grinned. Miss Carroll says I'm wise beyond my years. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. Rebecca laughed, a real laugh that surprised her. Come on, wise one. Let's make those heart-shaped pancakes. The kitchen turned into a disaster zone within minutes. Rebecca had watched the tutorials 3 times, but actually making pancakes was apparently harder than running a tech company. The first batch came out looking more like blobs than hearts. Sophie giggled so hard she had to hold her stomach. They look like clouds, Sophie said, pointing at the misshapen pancakes. Ugly clouds, Rebecca muttered, frowning at the pan. No such thing as an ugly cloud, Sophie declared. Clouds are all beautiful because they're all different. Rebecca looked at this 7-year-old girl who'd spent months in a hospital, but somehow still found beauty in everything. When did you get so wise? When you have a lot of time to think, you notice more things, Sophie said simply. She climbed onto a kitchen stool, swinging her legs. Can I help? 2 people together are better than 1 person alone. They made the next batch together, with Sophie pouring while Rebecca tried to shape the batter into hearts. These came out better, though still not perfect. But when Rebecca put the plate in front of Sophie, stacked with crooked heart-shaped pancakes and syrup, the little girl's reaction made every minute of tutorial watching worthwhile. They're perfect, Sophie whispered. Real hearts aren't perfect either. They have bumps and weird parts, but they still work just fine. Rebecca sat down across from her and they ate breakfast together as morning light filled the kitchen. Sophie told stories between bites, about the nurses who sang to her, about another patient, a boy named Tommy, who taught her how to play chess, about the dreams she had of someday going to school like other kids. Do you have a mama? Sophie asked, suddenly syrup on her chin. Rebecca wiped it away gently with a napkin. I did, a long time ago. She died when I was 14. Did it hurt a lot? Yes, it hurt so much that I decided never to let anyone get that close again. Sophie considered this seriously. But then you'd be alone forever. That sounds even worse than hurting. Rebecca stared at this child who seemed to understand things most adults couldn't grasp. You might be right about that. After breakfast, they drove to the park Sophie had mentioned. It was a small neighborhood park with a pond where ducks gathered every morning. Rebecca had driven past it 1,000 times but never once stopped. Sophie's energy seemed boundless as they walked along the path. She pointed out every flower, every bird, every interesting rock. Rebecca had bought a bag of duck food from a vendor at the park entrance, and Sophie clutched it like treasure. They sat on the grass by the pond, and Sophie scattered the food carefully, making sure every duck got some. That one's shy, she explained, pointing to a smaller duck hanging back. We have to make sure she doesn't get left out. Rebecca watched Sophie's face, the concentration and care she showed for a duck she'd never see again. This kid had every reason to be bitter or angry, but instead she worried about shy ducks getting enough food. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said. "Anything," Sophie replied, still focused on the ducks. "Aren't you angry? About being sick, about not having parents, about missing out on normal kid things?" Sophie was quiet for a moment. A breeze ruffled the edge of her yellow scarf. "Miss Carroll asked me that too. I told her being angry takes a lot of energy, and I need my energy for better things, like making friends, and feeding ducks, and spending days with ladies who might become my mama." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd cried more in the past 2 days than in the past 10 years. "Sophie, I don't know if I can be what you need." Sophie turned to look at her. Really look at her. "You're already what I need. You showed up. You kept your promise. You made me breakfast. You're here right now." She reached over and took Rebecca's hand. "That's what mamas do, right? They show up." They spent the afternoon checking off items from Sophie's list. Rebecca braided Sophie's hair, using a tutorial video on her phone while Sophie giggled at her concentration. They stopped at a cafe for hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Sophie insisted on getting matching nail polish, choosing a sparkly purple that the salon lady said was very sophisticated. As the nail technician painted their nails, Sophie chattered away about everything and nothing. Rebecca found herself relaxing in a way she never had before. No phones buzzing, no emails demanding attention. Just this moment in this chair, with this extraordinary little girl. "You have really nice hands," Sophie said, watching the technician work on Rebecca's nails. "Soft but strong, like they could hold on to someone really tight if they needed to." "Is that something you need?" Rebecca asked gently. "Someone to hold on tight?" Sophie nodded, suddenly serious. "Sometimes at night when the medicine makes me feel sick, I wish I had someone to hold my hand. Miss Carroll does when she can, but she has lots of other kids to take care of too." Rebecca's heart clenched. The image of Sophie alone in that hospital room at night, feeling sick with no one to hold her hand, was almost unbearable. What if? Rebecca started, then stopped. This was crazy. She couldn't be thinking what she was thinking. "What if what?" Sophie prompted. "What if this wasn't just one day? What if I came to visit you? Like all the time?" Sophie's eyes grew enormous. "Really? You'd want to?" "I think I'd like that very much," Rebecca said, and realized she meant it with every fiber of her being. Sophie launched herself out of her chair, nearly ruining both their fresh manicures, and threw her arms around Rebecca's neck. The nail technician smiled, her own eyes misty. "Can I tell you something?" Sophie whispered into Rebecca's ear. "Anything. I prayed for a mama every single night. I asked God or the universe or whoever listens to please send me someone who would love me, and then you walked around that corner and almost tripped over me." Sophie pulled back to look at Rebecca's face. "I think my prayer got answered. Maybe yours did too, even if you didn't know you were praying." Rebecca held this little girl close, feeling something fundamental shift inside her. All those years of building walls, of staying safe behind her work and her schedule, and her perfect, controlled life. And it took one brave 7-year-old to show her what she'd been missing. "Maybe it did," Rebecca whispered back. "Maybe it really did." As the sun began to set, they headed back to the apartment for the last items on Sophie's list. Storytime and photos. Rebecca had stopped at a bookstore and let Sophie pick out 3 books. They curled up together on the couch, that old blanket wrapped around them, and Rebecca read in a gentle voice she didn't even know she had. Halfway through the second book, Sophie's head drooped onto Rebecca's shoulder. But when Rebecca stopped reading, Sophie stirred. "Don't stop," Sophie mumbled. "I'm just resting my eyes. Mama's read even when kids are sleepy." So Rebecca kept reading, her arm around Sophie, feeling the little girl's steady breathing against her side. And somewhere in that moment, reading about dragons and princesses while the city lights began to twinkle outside, Rebecca realized something terrifying and wonderful. She didn't want this day to end. She didn't want any day with Sophie to end. She wanted all the days. The drive back to the hospital felt different than the drive away from it. Sophie sat quietly in the back seat, hugging Mr. Buttons, watching the streetlights blur past. She hadn't said much since they'd taken their photo together, the one where they both smiled so big it almost hurt. Rebecca kept glancing in the rearview mirror, memorizing Sophie's face in the dim light. "Do you have to work on Monday?" Sophie asked suddenly. "I do," Rebecca said, "but I'm coming back to see you on Monday evening, right after work, and Tuesday too." Wednesday? Rebecca smiled even though her throat felt tight. Every day, Sophie. I'm coming every single day. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, but what happens when you get tired of me? When you remember you have a whole important life and I'm just a sick kid who takes up too much time? Rebecca pulled the car over to the side of the road. She turned around in her seat to look at Sophie directly. Look at me, sweetheart. Sophie's eyes were shimmering with tears. She was trying hard not to cry. I'm not going anywhere, Rebecca said firmly. You're not taking up my time. You're giving it meaning. Do you understand the difference? Sophie shook her head. Before I met you, I spent every minute of every day working, making money, closing deals, building something that I thought mattered. But when I go home at night, you know what I have? An empty apartment with no pictures on the walls. No one to eat breakfast with. No one who cares if I'm there or not. Rebecca felt her own tears coming now. You gave me something to care about. Someone to care about. That's not taking, that's giving. Really? Sophie's voice was so hopeful it hurt. Really? In fact, I need to ask you something important. Rebecca took a deep breath. How would you feel if I tried to become your foster mom? And maybe if everything works out, adopt you for real? Sophie's mouth fell open. For a moment, she just stared. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt and scrambled into the front seat, wrapping her arms around Rebecca so tight she could barely breathe. Yes, 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 Sophie said between sobs. I want that more than anything in the whole world. Rebecca held her, both of them crying now, not caring about traffic or rules or anything else. This little girl had walked into her life 3 days ago, and somehow, Rebecca couldn't imagine life without her anymore. The next morning, Rebecca was in Carol's office before visiting hours officially started. Carol listened as Rebecca explained what she wanted to do, her expression carefully neutral. Do you understand what you're taking on? Carol asked when Rebecca finished. Sophie needs ongoing treatment. She'll have good days and really hard days. There will be hospital stays, medication schedules, doctor appointments, and there's no guarantee. She trailed off. I know, Rebecca said quietly. I know there's no guarantee she'll get better. But she deserves to have someone fighting for her. Someone who's there for the good days and the hard days. She deserves a family. Carol studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out a folder. The social worker's name is Mrs. Patterson. She handles all the foster and adoption cases for pediatric patients. I'll set up a meeting. How long does the process take? Depends. Background checks, home visits, interviews. Could be a few months. Could be longer. Carol leaned forward. Rebecca, I have to ask. Are you doing this because you genuinely want to be Sophie's mother? Or because you feel guilty? Because guilt is a terrible foundation for a family. Rebecca didn't hesitate. 3 days ago, maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pity, but now, Carol, I can't stop thinking about her. When I'm in meetings, I wonder what she's doing. When I eat dinner alone, I wish she was there telling me stories about ducks. I've reorganized my entire life in 3 days, and it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It feels like finally doing something right. Carol's stern expression softened into a smile. Then let's get started. The next few weeks blurred together. Rebecca met with Mrs. Patterson, filled out mountains of paperwork, submitted to background checks. Her apartment was inspected. Her finances were reviewed. She had to provide references, undergo interviews, take parenting classes. Her assistant Jennifer noticed the change immediately. You're leaving at 5 now? She said, shocked, watching Rebecca pack her briefcase one Thursday evening. Hospital visiting hours, Rebecca explained. I need to be there. But the Miller presentation is tomorrow. Don't you want to review it one more time? I reviewed it twice already. It's solid. Rebecca slung her bag over her shoulder. Besides, I promised Sophie I'd help her with her math homework. Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. Sophie? Who's Sophie? Rebecca smiled, pulling out her phone to show a photo. Sophie grinning with purple nail polish and a duck in the background. That's Sophie. I'm hoping she'll be my daughter soon. The word felt strange coming out of her mouth. Daughter, but also completely right. Jennifer stared at the photo, then at Rebecca, like she was seeing her for the first time. Boss, I've worked for you for 4 years. I've never seen you smile like you are right now. That's because I've never had a reason to, Rebecca said simply. Every evening Rebecca went to the hospital. Sometimes Sophie felt good, and they'd walk the hallways or sit in the playroom. Other times Sophie was tired from treatment, and Rebecca would just sit by her bed, reading stories or holding her hand while she slept. On the bad days, when the medicine made Sophie sick, Rebecca learned to be calm even when she felt panicked inside. She'd hold Sophie's hair back, wipe her face with a cool cloth and whisper that everything would be okay, that she wasn't going anywhere. "You're really good at this," Carol commented one evening, watching Rebecca comfort Sophie through a particularly rough night. "I'm terrified every second," Rebecca admitted. "That's how you know you care," Carol said. "The ones who aren't scared are the ones you worry about." 6 weeks after their first day together, Rebecca got the call from Mrs. Patterson. "You've been approved for emergency foster placement. Given Sophie's medical situation and lack of other family, we're expediting the process." Rebecca's hand shook as she held the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means once Sophie is cleared for discharge, she can come home with you. We'll continue to monitor the placement, and if everything goes well, we can proceed with adoption proceedings." Rebecca sank into her office chair, overwhelmed. When can she come home?" "Dr. Mitchell says if her counts stay stable, possibly in 2 weeks. I'll need you to meet with me 3 more times before then to go over care protocols and expectations." 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, Sophie would be living with her. Really living with her, not just visiting. Rebecca immediately called her building manager about converting the spare room she used for storage into a bedroom. Then she called a contractor, then a furniture store. She worked with a kind of focused intensity she usually reserved for product launches. The room transformed over those 2 weeks. Soft purple walls, white furniture with butterfly handles, a bookshelf that Rebecca filled with every children's book she could find, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling arranged in actual constellations, a reading nook with pillows and blankets, pictures of her and Sophie together now framed on the walls. Sophie didn't know. Rebecca wanted it to be a surprise. On the 13th day, Rebecca was at the hospital for evening visit when Dr. Mitchell came in with a smile. "Her numbers look great. If they hold through the weekend, I'm clearing her for discharge Monday morning." Sophie's squeal could probably be heard on every floor. "Really? I can really go home with Rebecca?" Really, Dr. Mitchell confirmed. Sophie launched herself at Rebecca, who caught her and spun her around. Both were laughing and crying at the same time. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Rebecca stood in the doorway of her room for a long time, watching her breathe. Carol came to stand beside her. "You know, when she first asked you for that day together, I didn't think you'd follow through," Carol admitted. "I've seen a lot of people make promises to these kids and then disappear." "I almost didn't," Rebecca said honestly. "I almost talked myself out of it 100 times. It seemed too complicated, too scary, too much. What changed?" Rebecca thought about it. "I realized that the scariest thing wasn't opening my heart to Sophie. It was the thought of living the rest of my life without her in it. That terrified me more than anything." Carol squeezed her shoulder. "She's lucky to have you." "I think I'm the lucky one," Rebecca said softly. Over that weekend, Rebecca prepared everything. She stocked the kitchen with Sophie's favorite foods, bought medicine organizers and labeled them carefully, set up a calendar system for appointments. She even got a car seat properly installed by a professional. On Sunday night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too excited and nervous to sleep. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she wouldn't be just Rebecca anymore. She'd be someone's mom. The responsibility of it hit her like a wave. What if she messed up? What if she wasn't good enough? What if Sophie needed something she couldn't provide? But then she remembered Sophie's words. "You showed up. That's what mamas do." And Rebecca knew deep in her bones that she would keep showing up. Every day. For every moment. Through every challenge. Because that's what love did. It showed up. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine that felt almost too perfect. Rebecca stood outside Sophie's hospital room at 8 in the morning, holding a bag with Sophie's going home outfit. Her hands were shaking. Carol found her there, frozen in place. "You okay?" "What if I can't do this?" Rebecca whispered. "What if I'm not enough?" Carol smiled gently. "Every parent feels that way. The difference is, you care enough to worry about it. That's already half the battle." Inside, Sophie was sitting on her bed, already dressed in her hospital clothes, practically bouncing with excitement. When she saw Rebecca, she jumped up so fast the nurse checking her vitals had to steady her. "Is it time?" "Can we really go?" "It's time," Rebecca said, her voice catching. Are you ready to come home? Sophie grabbed Mr. Buttons and her small backpack. I've been ready forever. The discharge process took 2 hours. Papers to sign, medications to collect, instructions to review. Dr. Mitchell went through everything 3 times, making sure Rebecca understood the warning signs to watch for, the emergency protocols, the follow-up appointments already scheduled. Finally, they walked out through the hospital doors. Sophie held Rebecca's hand tightly, squinting in the bright sunlight. It's so bright out here, Sophie said, shading her eyes. I forgot how bright the world is. Rebecca helped her into the car, buckling her in carefully. As they drove away from the hospital, Sophie pressed her face against the window, watching everything pass by like she was seeing it all for the first time. Are you nervous? Rebecca asked. A little, Sophie admitted. What if I don't know how to be a regular kid? What if I'm too much trouble? Rebecca caught her eye in the mirror. Sophie, you could never be too much trouble, and you don't have to be anything except exactly who you are. When they pulled into the parking garage of Rebecca's building, Sophie's eyes went wide. We're really here. This is really happening. This is really happening, Rebecca confirmed. The elevator ride up felt like it took forever. Sophie held Rebecca's hand the entire time, swinging Mr. Buttons with the other. When they reached the apartment door, Rebecca paused. Close your eyes, she said. Why? Because I have a surprise. Trust me? Sophie closed her eyes tight, a smile already forming. Rebecca unlocked the door and guided her inside, leading her down the hallway to what used to be the storage room. Okay, Rebecca said, her heart pounding. Open them. Sophie's eyes opened, and for a moment she just stood there, completely still. Then her mouth fell open as she took in the purple walls, the white furniture, the books, the reading nook, the stars on the ceiling. Is this mine? She whispered. All yours, Rebecca said. Your room. In your home. Sophie walked in slowly, touching everything like she was afraid it might disappear. She ran her hands over the butterfly bookshelf, picked up the stuffed animals arranged on the bed, looked up at the stars overhead. Then she saw the pictures on the wall. Photos of her and Rebecca from their day together, the one with the ducks, the one with their matching purple nails, the one where they both had syrup on their faces from pancakes. That's when Sophie started crying. Not sad crying, but the kind of crying that happens when something is so good you can't hold it inside anymore. Rebecca knelt down beside her. What's wrong, sweetheart? Nothing's wrong, Sophie sobbed, throwing her arms around Rebecca's neck. Everything's right. Everything's so right, and I'm just so happy, and I don't know what to do with all this happy. Rebecca held her tight, crying too. You don't have to do anything with it. Just feel it. Just be happy. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in Sophie's new room, crying happy tears. The first few days were an adjustment. Sophie had to take her medicine 3 times a day, and Rebecca set alarms to make sure they never forgot. They established routines: breakfast together, medicine, reading time, rest time when Sophie needed it, dinner, bath, bedtime stories. Some moments were harder than others. The first night, Sophie woke up at 2 a.m, disoriented and scared, calling for Carol. Rebecca rushed in, turning on the small nightlight. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Sophie's eyes focused on her, still half asleep. Where's Miss Carol? You're home now, remember? You're with me. Sophie's face crumpled. I miss her. I miss the hospital. Is that weird? Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Sophie's hair back. It's not weird at all. That was your home for a long time. The nurses were your family. Missing them doesn't mean you don't want to be here. I do want to be here, Sophie said quickly. I want to be here more than anything. Then that's all that matters. And we can call Miss Carol tomorrow if you want. Or visit her. They did visit. Every week they went back to the hospital so Sophie could see the nurses and the other kids. Carol always had a hug ready, and Sophie would light up seeing her. But Rebecca noticed that as the weeks went on, Sophie was always ready to go home afterward. Ready to get back to their apartment, their routines, their life together. At work, Rebecca's entire approach changed. She started a new initiative allowing employees to bring their kids to the office when needed. She approved a comprehensive family leave policy. When her board questioned these decisions, she told them simply, family matters more than quarterly earnings. One board member, an older man who'd known Rebecca for years, pulled her aside after a meeting. What happened to you? You used to eat, sleep, and breathe this company. Rebecca smiled. I found something more important to live for. 3 months after Sophie came home, they sat in Mrs. Patterson's office for the final adoption hearing preparation. Sophie wore a new dress, purple with white butterflies, and sat on Rebecca's lap instead of her own chair. "Sophie," Mrs. Patterson said gently, "I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Sophie nodded, squeezing Mr. Buttons. "Do you want Rebecca to be your forever mama?" "More than anything in the whole world," Sophie said without hesitation. "Why?" Sophie thought about it. "Because she doesn't just take care of me when it's easy. She takes care of me when I'm sick, when I'm grumpy, when I wake up scared in the night. She reads me stories even when she's tired. She makes me heart-shaped pancakes even though they're hard. She shows up every single day." Sophie looked up at Rebecca. "That's what mamas do." "They show up?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the millionth time since meeting Sophie. Mrs. Patterson was smiling too. "And Rebecca, are you ready to be Sophie's forever mama?" Rebecca held Sophie closer. "I've been ready since the moment she asked me for one day together. I just didn't know it yet." The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in March. They stood in the courthouse surrounded by Carol, Jennifer, Dr. Mitchell, and a few nurses from the hospital. The judge smiled down at them. "This is the best part of my job," she said, "making families official." When she stamped the papers, Sophie officially became Sophie Chen. She had a family, a last name, a mother who chose her. That evening they had a small celebration at the apartment. Sophie wore a paper crown Carol had made, declaring her Princess Sophie of the Chen Kingdom. They had heart-shaped pancakes for dinner because Sophie insisted, and nobody argued with the princess on her adoption day. As the guests left and Rebecca tucked Sophie into bed that night, Sophie looked up at her with those same brown eyes that had stopped Rebecca in a hospital hallway months ago. "Can I tell you something?" Sophie whispered. "Always. When I asked you to spend one day with me, I was really scared you'd say no. I'd asked other people before, and they always said they were too busy or made excuses." Rebecca's heart broke imagining Sophie asking others, being turned down, gathering courage to ask again. "But you said yes," Sophie continued. "And then you kept saying yes. Every day you kept choosing me, and now I'm yours forever and you're mine forever, and I don't have to be alone anymore. You're never going to be alone again," Rebecca promised, kissing her forehead. "I'm always going to be right here, on the good days and the hard days, when you're healthy and when you're not feeling well, when you're happy and when you're sad. Always." Sophie smiled sleepily. "That's what I always wanted. Just someone who would stay." "I'm staying," Rebecca whispered. "Forever and ever." As Sophie drifted off to sleep, Rebecca sat there in the dim glow of the nightlight watching her daughter breathe. Her daughter. The word still felt surreal. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Racing through hospital hallways, eyes on her phone, convinced that work and success were all that mattered. She'd had everything money could buy and somehow had nothing at all. Then a brave little girl in a yellow scarf had crashed into her legs and asked for one day. Just one day to know what it felt like to have a mama. That one day had turned into forever, and Rebecca realized that Sophie hadn't just found a mother that day in the hospital corridor. Rebecca had found herself. She reached over and held Sophie's small hand in hers, feeling the steady warmth of it, the trust in that simple touch. Outside, the city lights twinkled. Inside, this little room with purple walls and ceiling stars held everything that mattered: love, family, home. Rebecca finally understood what it meant to be truly rich, and it had nothing to do with money at all.